Damnatio ad Bestias, meaning condemnation to the beasts, was a form of Roman capital punishment in which the condemned person was killed by wild animals, usually lions or other big cats. This form of execution, which first appeared during the Roman Republic around the 2nd century BC, was part of a wider class of blood sports known as bestiarii. Public damnatio ad bestias was considered a common form of entertainment. Killings by wild animals formed part of the inaugural games of the Colosseum in AD 80. Between the 1st and 3rd centuries AD, this penalty was applied to the worst criminals, runaway slaves, and Christians. The exact purpose of early forms of damnatio ad bestias is not known. They might have been intended as religious sacrifices rather than as punishments, especially in regions where lions existed naturally and were revered by the population. In North Africa, during the Mercenary War, the Carthaginian general Hamilcar Barca threw prisoners to the beasts, whereas Hannibal forced Romans captured in the Punic Wars to fight each other, and the survivors had to stand against elephants. There were no wild lions in Italy, and human sacrifice had been banned in the Roman kingdom since the 7th century BC, according to legends which attributed this ban to Numa Pompilius. When damnatio ad bestias appeared there later, it was as a punishment and spectacle rather than as a spiritual practice. The custom of submitting criminals to lions was brought to ancient Rome by two commanders, Lucius Aemilius Paulus Macedonicus, who defeated the Macedonians in 167 BC, and his son Scipio Aemilianus, who conquered the African city of Carthage in 146 BC. It was originally a military punishment, possibly borrowed from the Carthaginians. Rome reserved its earliest use for non-Roman military allies found guilty of defection or desertion. The condemned were tied to columns or thrown to the animals, practically defenseless, obisur bestias. Among the documented cases of damnatio ad bestias in ancient Rome is the execution of the rebel slave leader Solurus, witnessed by Strabo. Such executions were also documented by Seneca the Younger and Lucretius. Pompey used damnatio ad bestias for showcasing battles and, during his second consulship in 55 BC, staged a fight between heavily armed gladiators and 18 elephants. In a letter to a friend, Cicero described these games as splendid but tasteless, noting that a man of refinement could find no pleasure in repeatedly seeing how a weak man is torn by an extremely powerful animal. Fictional instances are featured in Petronius's Satyricon and in Apuleius's novel The Golden Ass. Some convicts were killed in executions deliberately arranged to resemble scenes from mythology. Martial, who wrote about the Colosseum's opening games in his Book of Spectacles, described how a man dressed as Orpheus, playing his lyre, was ripped apart by a bear. Similarly, the bandit Laurelius was crucified and then devoured by an eagle and a bear in a deadly staging of the myth of Prometheus. The most popular animals were tigers, which were imported to Rome in significant numbers specifically for damnatio ad bestias. Brown bears, brought from Gaul, Germany, and even North Africa, were less popular. Local municipalities were ordered to provide food for animals in transit and not delay their stay for more than a week. Some historians believe that the mass export of animals to Rome had a serious impact on wildlife numbers in North Africa. The use of damnatio ad bestias against Christians began in the 1st century AD. Tacitus states that during the first persecution of Christians under the reign of Nero, after the Great Fire of Rome in AD 64, people were wrapped in animal skins, called tunica molesta, and thrown to dogs. This practice was followed by other emperors, who moved it into the arena and used larger animals. The application of Damnatio ad Bestias to Christians was intended to equate them with the worst criminals, who were usually punished in this way. There is no conclusive evidence that Christians were ever executed in the Colosseum in Rome, though it is quite plausible that some of them were. According to Roman laws, Christians were considered guilty of high treason, majestatis rei, participants in unlawful assemblies, since they gathered in secret and at night. Participation in such collegium illicitum or coitus nocturni was equated with a riot. Guilty of refusing to honor images of the emperor with libations and incense. Dissenters from the state gods, athioi, sacrilegi, followers of magic prohibited by law, magi, malefici, confessors of a religion unauthorized by law, religio nova, peregrinaeti illicita, according to the 12 tables. The spread of the practice of throwing Christians to beasts was reflected by the Christian writer Tertullian in the 2nd century AD. He states that the general public blamed Christians for any general misfortune and, after natural disasters, would cry, "Away with them, to the lions." This is the only reference from contemporaries mentioning Christians being thrown specifically to lions. Tertullian also wrote that Christians started avoiding theaters and circuses, which were associated with the place of their torture. The Passion of Saint Perpetua, Saint Felicitas, and their companions, a text which purports to be an eyewitness account written by Vibia Perpetua, tells of a group of Christians condemned to damnatio ad bestias at Carthage in AD 203. It states that the men were required to dress in the robes of priests of the Roman god Saturn, while the women were dressed as priestesses of Ceres. They were brought into the arena in separate groups, first the men and then the women, and exposed to a variety of wild beasts. At the resistance of Perpetua, however, the tribune relented, and the prisoners were allowed to enter wearing their own clothing. The two young women, Perpetua and the slave girl Felicitas, were reserved as the finale to the executions to face a wild cow. Since it was thought that public nudity would cast doubt on their fidelity, further degradation was added by not only exposing them to the beast, but also using one of their own sex rather than the usual male animal. The implication was that the women were shown as not being women enough to commit adultery. After having all their clothing removed, Perpetua and Felicitas were driven into the arena covered only in see-through netting. As this proved too much for the crowd, they were brought back to be clothed in plain, loose garments before being sent in again to face the beast. This was not the only instance of such treatment being used on Christian women. Many were also subjected to other punishments and harsh tortures beforehand. More generally, in contrast to their clothed male counterparts, women were tied fully naked to stakes or pillars with their hands behind their backs. Full body exposure of a woman to a bull after being entirely stripped of all her clothing was one aspect of her humiliation. The implication was that she was not regarded in the same way as clothed male victims, but was rendered helpless, and that being denuded in public implied a charge of adultery. Those who survived the first animal attacks were either brought back for further exposure to the beasts or executed publicly by a gladiator. The persecution of Christians ceased by the 4th century AD. The Edict of Milan, issued in AD 313, granted them freedom of religion. Roman laws, which are known to us through Byzantine collections such as the Code of Theodosius and the Code of Justinian, defined which criminals could be thrown to beasts or condemned by other means. They included deserters from the army, those who employed sorcerers to harm others during the reign of Caracalla, This law was re-established in AD 357 by Constantius II. Poisoners. Under the law of Cornelius, patricians were beheaded, plebeians were thrown to lions, and slaves were crucified. Counterfeiters, who could also be burned alive. Political criminals. For example, after the overthrow and assassination of Commodus, the new emperor threw to the lions both the servants of Commodus and Narcissus, who had strangled him. Even though Narcissus helped bring the new emperor to power, he had committed the crime of murdering the previous emperor. The same punishment was applied to Bestias, who organized the assassination of Emperor Aurelian. Patricides, who were normally drowned in a leather sack filled with snakes, Punic, but could be thrown to beasts if a suitable body of water was not available. Instigators of uprisings, who were either crucified, thrown to beasts, or exiled, depending on their social status. Those who kidnapped children for ransom. According to a law issued in AD 315 by Emperor Constantine the Great, they were either thrown to beasts or beheaded. The condemned person was deprived of civil rights. He could not write a will, and his property was confiscated. An exception to Damnatio ad Bestias was granted to military personnel and their children. In addition, the Lex Patronia of AD 61 forbade masters from sending their slaves to be eaten by wild animals without a judicial verdict. Local governors were also required to consult a Roman deputy before staging a fight between skilled gladiators and wild animals. The practice of Damnatio ad Bestias was abolished in Rome in AD 681. It was used only once afterward in the Byzantine Empire. In AD 1022, several disgraced generals were arrested for plotting a conspiracy against Emperor Basil II. They were imprisoned and their property confiscated, but the royal eunuch who had assisted them was thrown to the lions. Early accounts of miraculous or legendary escapes from death by wild beasts appear in several ancient traditions. Daniel, in the book of Daniel, c. 2nd century BC, survived a night in the lion's den. The Greek writer Appian, writing in the 1st century AD, tells the story of the slave Androcles during the reign of Caligula. After fleeing his master, Androcles was captured and condemned to face a lion. The animal recognized him because, while hiding in Africa, Androcles had removed a thorn from its paw. Instead of attacking him, the lion spared his life. Mams of Caesarea, according to Christian tradition. Paul, according to apocryphal writings and later medieval legends based on his statement, "I have fought with beasts at Ephesus," in 1 Corinthians 15 verse 32.